The sun burned brightly in the sky as Captain Elara Drake stood at the edge of the towering cliff, her boots dug into the parched earth beneath her feet. The winds swept fiercely around her, blowing strands of her dark hair into her face. She wiped it away with one swift motion. As her eyes scanned the horizon far below, the sprawling metropolis gleamed under the oppressive sun, a city of glass and steel, where the rich thrived and the poor struggled to survive. She had spent years in this place fighting for survival, battling both the system and the alien forces that now encroached on her homeworld, Earth, her world. From the moment the first alien ships had entered Earth's atmosphere, the people of Earth had known a war was coming, one they had never prepared for. When the Valkyrians arrived, they were not the peaceful explorers the people had hoped for, but invaders ruthless in their methods and efficient in their destruction. They came in overwhelming numbers with technology that Earth could barely comprehend, and for a time humanity struggled against their might. Elara had fought in the early battles, leading her squadron through the chaos as Earth's defenses crumbled around them. But then something unexpected happened. Humanity began to adapt, and not just to survive, but to thrive under the pressure. Elara had seen it firsthand how human ingenuity and spirit began to rise up. The resistance was born from the ashes of cities left in ruins, the fire of defiance spreading faster than the Valkyrians could suppress it. And at the heart of that fire was Elara herself. Her courage and determination had earned her the respect of allies and enemies alike. And though she had been branded as a symbol of hope to the oppressed, she still carried the weight of countless lives lost in the struggle. She remembered the faces of those she couldn't save, the screams of the fallen echoing in her mind. It was a burden she would carry for the rest of her days. She looked down at her wrist, where a small, glowing device hummed with energy. It was a piece of technology that she had discovered during one of her missions, a relic from the earliest days of the invasion. It was said to be a weapon capable of turning the tide of war, a weapon capable of defeating the Valkyrians once and for all. Elara had kept it hidden from everyone, even her most trusted allies, unsure whether she could truly trust the power it held. But today, it would be used or destroyed in the final stand. The wind howled again, carrying with it the distant sound of a battle. The Valkyrians were moving closer, and Elara knew that time was running out. There was no more room for hesitation, no more time to second-guess herself. The choice had been made, and it was time for humanity to show the invaders what they were truly capable of. She clenched her fist around the device, feeling its weight as a surge of determination flooded through her veins. She had witnessed humanity rise from the ashes before, and now it was time to show the invaders that Earth was not a world to be conquered. It was a world that would fight until the very end. She turned and began the descent down the cliff, face her boots crunching against the dry rocks, her mind focused on the task ahead. The final confrontation was upon them, and Elara was ready to lead humanity into the heart of the storm, ready to fight for the future of her world. The battle for Earth was about to begin anew. Elara's boots hit the cracked pavement of the city streets as she made her way towards the heart of the Resistance's hidden base. The noise of distant explosions reverberated through the air, the ground trembling beneath her feet. The Valkyrian forces were getting closer, their ships darkening the skies with their ominous presence. Yet Elara had no intention of running or hiding. She had faced worse and survived. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for, the moment when they would show the Valkyrians that Earth was more than just a backwater planet for them to conquer. The hidden base was underground, nestled within the remnants of an old military facility long abandoned after the first wave of the invasion, but it had since been repurposed into the heart of the Resistance, a place where Earth's remaining forces had come together to fight back against their oppressors. Elara moved swiftly through the corridors, her mind focused her every step, leading her closer to the room where the device, the weapon that could shift the tides of war, awaited her. The Resistance had fought for months to uncover its secrets, but now Elara alone held the key to unlocking its full potential. As she entered the command center, the room fell silent. Every eye turned toward her, the tension in the air palpable. The faces of soldiers, scientists, and strategists alike all bore the same weight of uncertainty. They had trusted her to lead them to victory, and now they were all waiting for her to make the call. Commander Ryan stood at the center of the room, his graying hair and stern face a sharp contrast to the youthful energy of the others. But his eyes were filled with respect and concern. Ilara had earned his trust through countless battles together, and now his words carried the weight of the decision they all had to make. "Ilara, we've been waiting for you," he said, his voice low but steady. "The Valkyrians are closing in on all fronts. We have one shot at this, and it's all riding on you. Are you ready to activate the device?" Ilara looked around the room at the faces of the people who had fought alongside her through the darkest days of the war. They were all counting on her, but there was a part of her that still questioned the power of the device, its origins, and the price that might come with using it. The Valkyrians had underestimated humanity in the past. But what if this weapon was beyond anything they could control? What if it would do more harm than good? She reached for the device at her side, the smooth surface, warm to the touch, the power within it pulsing like a heartbeat. It was a gift from the past, left by an unknown civilization far more advanced than anything humanity had ever encountered. And now it was the last hope of saving their world. Ilara's fingers brushed against the glowing symbols etched into its surface, and for a moment she felt a strange sense of connection, as if the device itself was alive and aware of the weight of the decision she was about to make. "I'm ready," she said, her voice strong despite the uncertainty that lingered in her heart. "Activate the systems and prepare the weapon for launch." Ryan nodded and turned to the technicians who had been preparing the base's systems for this moment. As they worked frantically to unlock the weapon's full potential, Ilara's thoughts turned inward. She had led humanity through countless battles, but this one felt different. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for Earth's soul, to show the universe that humanity would never bow down to invaders, that no matter the odds they would stand together and fight. The countdown began, and as the weapon powered up, Ilara felt a surge of energy radiate through her body like nothing she had ever experienced. The power of the device was real, and it was more than they had ever dreamed possible. But would it be enough? The countdown echoed through the underground command center like a drumbeat as Ilara stood motionless, her eyes locked on the device. As the technicians worked quickly, their hands flying over controls, as the energy levels surged, the atmosphere in the room was electric. Anticipation hung thick in the air. Every person in the room knew that the moment the device activated, it would change everything. It would either be their salvation or their doom. Ilara clenched her fists at her sides, her breath steady. Despite the chaos unfolding around her, the weight of the moment was almost unbearable. The hum of the machine grew louder, a deep resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. And then the room went silent. As the device reached its peak energy, Ilara felt a strange warmth envelop her. As the air around her shimmered with the raw power the weapon contained, she could feel the energy surge through the ground beneath her feet. And for the first time in a long while, Ilara felt something that resembled hope. Ryan's voice cut through the silence. "It's ready, Ilara." She nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving the device. It was time. She fought time to make the final stand against the Valkyrians, to end the war that had taken so much from them all. They had sacrificed so much already, and now it was their turn to take back their world, to prove to the invaders that Earth was not a planet to be conquered, but a force to be reckoned with. With a steady hand, Ilara reached forward and placed her palm against the device. Its surface cooled to the touch, despite the immense power contained within it. The moment her skin made contact, the symbols on its surface glowed brighter, their light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. And then, without warning, the world seemed to shift. The very air seemed to bend around them. The energy released from the device was unlike anything Ilara had ever felt before. It surged outward in a blinding wave of light, so powerful it threatened to consume everything in its path. For a brief moment, everything went white, and then the shockwave hit. It was not the kind of explosion that sent debris flying or shattered buildings. No, this shockwave was different. It rippled through the very fabric of space itself, bending reality in ways that defied logic. Ilara could feel it in her bones. The power was not just destructive, it was transformative. Across the city, she could feel the ground shake beneath her feet as the Valkyrian forces were hit by the full force of the weapon, their ships faltering as they were bombarded with the wave of energy that had been unleashed. Humanity's final weapon had been activated, and the Valkyrians were feeling its effects immediately. But Ilara knew it wouldn't be enough. Not yet. They had to act quickly before the invaders could regroup, before they could mount a counterattack. "Prepare for the final push," Ilara commanded, her voice sharp and clear. "We move now while they're disoriented." Ryan nodded as the command center came alive with activity soldiers and operatives flooding the room. As the final phase of the assault began, Ilara could hear the distant sounds of battle rising from the surface, the chaos of war reverberating through the ground beneath them. But she remained focused. She had led humanity this far, and she would see it through to the end. As the resistance forces began their march toward the heart of the Valkyrian stronghold, Ilara's thoughts turned once more to the device. Its power was undeniable. But the question remained, what had they truly unleashed? Would it be enough to turn the tide of the war, or had they awakened something even more dangerous, something they could not control? In that moment, Ilara understood the true cost of the weapon. It was not just a tool of destruction, it was a catalyst for something greater, and whether it would be humanity's salvation or its undoing was yet to be seen. The war had changed forever, and so too had humanity. The ground beneath Ilara trembled as her boots pressed into the soft earth. The city was alive with the sounds of battle, the rumble of distant explosions, the crackle of energy weapons firing, as humanity's forces clashed with the Valkyrian invaders in a desperate struggle for control. All around her, the resistance soldiers pushed forward with renewed vigor, their hearts filled with a fierce determination born of desperation and hope. Ilara's mind raced as she led her squad through the chaos, her eyes darting between the advancing enemy and the darkened sky overhead. The Valkyrian ships still hovered high above, unleashing volleys of fire on the ground below. But now they were disoriented, their once precise attacks now erratic and wild thanks to the devastating pulse of energy. The device had unleashed, the weapon had shaken them. And that was the key to victory. Ilara knew they couldn't afford to let this opportunity slip through their fingers. As they moved deeper into the city, the resistance forces were encountering pockets of Valkyrian soldiers regrouping after the initial shockwave, their weapons still deadly, but their coordination fractured and weak. Ilara could see the fear in their eyes, the uncertainty that had crept into their ranks. The invaders, who had once thought of Earth as an easy conquest, were now facing the full wrath of humanity's will to survive. "Ilara, we've got a situation up ahead." Ryan's voice crackled through her comlink, his tone urgent. "What's happening?" Ilara asked, not breaking her stride, as she led her team toward the front lines. "We've encountered a Valkyrian stronghold. It's heavily fortified, and they got a new weapon, a kind of shield that's blocking our progress. We can't advance without neutralizing it." Ilara cursed under her breath. The Valkyrians had adapted quickly. They were not as disoriented as they had seemed, and now they were rolling out a new weapon, something that could stop humanity's advance before they even reached the heart of the Valkyrian command center. "Do we have any intel on the shield's weak points?" Ilara asked, as she quickly scanned the battlefield ahead, the flickering images of explosions and flashing energy shields illuminating the dark streets. "We believe it's powered by a central core located near the center of their stronghold. If we can breach their defenses and take out the core, we can disable the shield and move in to finish the job," Ryan replied. Ilara's mind raced. The Valkyrians had been one step ahead, but they had underestimated humanity's adaptability once again. They had pushed Earth's people into a corner, and they had fought their way out, but time was running out. If they didn't act now, the shield would give the invaders the advantage they needed to regroup and crush the resistance. "We'll split into two teams," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "One team will move in to take out the core, the other will hold the line and distract the Valkyrians long enough for the first team to complete the mission. We're not leaving until this shield goes down." She turned to her squad, a group of experienced soldiers who had fought alongside her since the early days of the invasion. Their eyes were filled with the same unshakable resolve. They had always shown they knew what was at stake, and they knew the risks, but they followed her without hesitation. "Let's make it count," Ilara said, her voice a low command, as she nodded to Ryan to begin the operation. As the two teams moved into position, the resistance pushed forward into the heart of the Valkyrian stronghold, a series of fortified bunkers and high-tech defenses that had been erected in the wake of the initial attack. They had no choice but to fight their way through the relentless onslaught of enemy fire. But Ilara could feel the power of the weapon they had unleashed earlier. Still coursing through the air, the Valkyrians were no longer the overwhelming force they had once been. They were vulnerable, and humanity was seizing its moment. The core was within reach, but the Valkyrians were not going down without a fight. Their new shield was only the beginning, and Ilara knew the battle for Earth was far from over. Ilara's breath came in quick, shallow gasps as she ducked behind the crumbling remains of a building. The sound of energy blasts ricocheting off the walls was deafening. Her squad was moving with precision, each soldier knowing their role, but the Valkyrians were adapting faster than they had expected. Their new shield was holding firm. But it wasn't the only thing they had to worry about. Ilara could feel it, a presence in the air, a feeling that something was watching them, waiting, and she knew that the Valkyrians were far from the only threat on the battlefield. Ilara, we're in position. Ryan's voice crackled over the comlink, his tone tense. We've got a clear shot at the core, but we've got heavy resistance moving in from the east. They're bringing in something new. I don't like it. Ilara's mind raced. She had anticipated the Valkyrians' retaliation, but something about Ryan's words sent a chill down her spine. She had seen the invaders' weaponry and tactics firsthand. But this felt different. This wasn't just an ordinary counterattack. This was something personal, something that struck at the heart of their efforts. Stay sharp, Ilara ordered as she peered around the corner of the building and scanned the battlefield. The resistance forces were engaged in fierce combat, but the Valkyrians were not simply trying to repel them, they were retreating, as if drawing them into a trap. Ilara, we've got a problem. Ryan's voice was urgent now. They've activated something on the other side of the city. It's massive. It's not a ship, it's like they've built a fortress in the middle of the city. Ilara's eyes narrowed as she scanned the horizon. The silhouette of something enormous began to emerge from the dust and smoke, something that dwarfed even the Valkyrian warships hovering overhead. It was a massive structure, a towering fortress, designed for one purpose: to crush everything in its path. And Ilara knew instinctively that it wasn't just a weapon, it was a message. The Valkyrians had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back, but now they were going to show the full extent of their power. We can't let them finish that thing, Ilara said through gritted teeth, her pulse quickening, as she realized the scope of the Valkyrian plan. If they completed the construction of this new weapon, it would be the end of humanity's resistance. She turned to her squad, her eyes fierce. We take that thing down, or this war is over. The squad nodded grimly, their expressions matching her resolve. They had come too far to back down now. They would fight until the very end. Ilara knew it wasn't just Earth's future on the line. It was everything they had fought for, all the lives lost, all the sacrifices made. And she would not let that be in vain. Ryan, we're moving out, Ilara said firmly. Keep pressure on the core team. We'll take care of this new threat. She didn't wait for a response before signaling her squad to move out. They dashed through the streets, dodging incoming fire. As they made their way toward the massive Valkyrian fortress, the air was thick with smoke and dust, the faint smell of burning metal stinging the back of her throat, and with every step she could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. But she refused to falter. She had led humanity through the darkest days of the war, and she wasn't about to stop now. As they approached the fortress, the ground trembled with the sound of approaching footsteps, and Ilara's eyes narrowed in realization. Something was coming toward them, something that was not a Valkyrian soldier, but something far more terrifying, something designed to hunt them down. From the shadows emerged a massive humanoid figure, its armor gleaming with deadly intent. It was unlike anything Ilara had ever seen, a creature of pure destruction, built for one purpose: to annihilate everything in its path. The Valkyrians had unleashed their ultimate weapon, and it was coming straight for them. Ilara, look out, one of her soldiers shouted, but it was too late. The creature was upon them. The battle for Earth had just taken a deadly turn, and Ilara knew there would be no turning back. The ground shook violently as the monstrous figure charged toward them, its heavy footsteps reverberating through the cracked streets. Ilara barely had time to react as the creature's massive arms swung with terrifying speed, its armored fists crashing into the ground just inches from her squad. Ilara dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly strike. Her heart raced as she scrambled to her feet. The sheer size and power of the creature were unlike anything she had encountered before. It was as if the Valkyrians had taken their most terrifying war machine and made it alive. "Ilara, get back!" Ryan's voice screamed through her earpiece. But Ilara was already moving, her instincts kicking in as she signaled for her squad to spread out. The creature was too fast to confront head-on and too powerful to outgun. They needed to outsmart it. "Form a perimeter," Ilara shouted as she drew her weapon, aiming it at the approaching behemoth. "We need to keep it away from the others. Focus on the weak points in its armor." The soldiers quickly fell into formation, their weapons trained on the creature's legs and joints. But the beast was relentless. It moved with terrifying precision. Despite its size, each step seemed to shake the ground beneath them as it brought its massive arm down again, sending shockwaves of debris scattering in all directions. "Ilara, we can't hold it off for long," one of her soldiers called out as the beast lunged forward again, its claws extended ready to tear through anything in its path. Ilara gritted her teeth and took aim once more, her mind calculating the best possible angle for an attack. She had fought alien forces for years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The odds seemed impossible, yet she refused to back down. She refused to let her people lose. "Ilara, I've got an idea." Ryan's voice cut through the chaos, his tone full of urgency. "We've got to hit it from behind. There's a weak point in its back armor. If we can get a clear shot, we can disable it." "I'm listening," Ilara responded quickly, her mind racing. As she surveyed the battlefield, the creature was too unpredictable to get a clean shot from the front. But Ryan's plan made sense. They had to take advantage of its blind spot. "Move to the rear," Ryan instructed. "I'll create a distraction up front. You'll have your shot." Ilara didn't hesitate. She signaled her squad to follow her, and together they darted toward the creature's back, while Ryan's team engaged the creature head-on. The moment they were in position, Ilara could feel the tension in the air. The beast's movements were swift and erratic, but they were close enough to strike now. "Ilara, now," Ryan called out. Ilara took a deep breath and fired a concentrated burst of energy at the creature's back, a direct hit that caused the massive figure to stagger for a moment. But it wasn't enough. The creature roared in fury and twisted around faster than she had anticipated, its glowing red eyes locked onto the squad, and in that instant Ilara realized they were far from safe. The creature retaliated with a deadly swipe, sending one of her soldiers crashing into the wall with bone-shattering force. The others scrambled to take cover, but Ilara could feel the weight of the battle beginning to slip from their grasp. The Valkyrians were relentless. They had been one step ahead from the beginning, and no matter how hard they fought, it felt like Earth was on the verge of being overwhelmed. "Ilara, we need more firepower," Ryan shouted as he scrambled toward the beast's side. "We can't take it down with conventional weapons. We need something bigger." Ilara's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She had one option left: the weapon they had unlocked earlier, the device that had already shifted the balance of the war. If it had the power to take out the Valkyrian fleet, surely it could handle this monstrosity. "Get back," she ordered as she turned to the others. "I'm activating the device." She could hear the protests from her squad, but there was no time to waste. The creature was already recovering, and the rest of the Valkyrian forces would be on them any second. Ilara quickly retrieved the device from her belt and pressed the activation button. As the familiar pulse of energy surged through her fingertips, she felt the power course through her once more. This time it felt different, stronger, and more focused. "Hold on," Ilara muttered as she pointed the device directly at the creature. The beam of energy shot forward with blinding intensity, slamming into the creature's back with a deafening crack. The creature howled in agony as its armor began to crack and shatter. The energy seemed to tear through it with terrifying force, and for a brief moment, Ilara saw the vulnerable core of the beast exposed. "Now's our chance," she shouted to her squad. In unison, they opened fire on the exposed core, with everything they had, their weapons discharging with unrelenting fury. The beast rode one final time before collapsing to the ground in a heap of broken armor and smoking wreckage. Ilara stood panting as the dust settled around them. The victory was hard won, but the war was far from over. The silence that followed the destruction of the massive creature was deafening. The battlefield was still filled with the acrid scent of burning metal and the heavy dust that clung to the air, but the immediate threat had been neutralized. Ilara's squad stood motionless, their eyes on the fallen behemoth, as the realization began to sink in. They had done it. They had brought down the ultimate weapon, but at what cost? Ilara's heart pounded in her chest as she surveyed the damage to her team. One of her soldiers was down, wounded badly, but alive, and the others were shaken, their faces covered in grime and sweat, yet their expressions were filled with a grim determination. They had survived, but they knew the fight wasn't over. "Get the medic over here," Ilara barked, her voice cold with urgency, as she rushed to the side of the injured soldier. His leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and his breathing was labored, but he was still conscious. "I'm good, Ilara, just need to rest for a minute," the soldier grunted through gritted teeth. But Ilara didn't buy it. She knew how much damage the creature's swipe had done, and the medic was needed immediately. "Not good enough," Ilara said sharply as she tapped her comlink. "Ryan, we need a medic over here now." Within moments, a medic appeared and began tending to the wounded soldier. Ilara stood over them, her mind still focused on the task at hand. The Valkyrians were not the only threat in this war. She knew the true cost of the weapon they had just unleashed would soon become clear. The power they had tapped into was not just a tool of destruction. It was a dangerous force capable of reshaping the very fabric of reality, and Ilara knew they hadn't fully understood what they had set into motion. "Ryan, status update," Ilara asked, as she turned to the commander who was overseeing the rest of the operation. "We're making progress. The core is almost disabled, but there's a new problem." Ryan's voice came through the comlink, his tone grave. "We've detected a massive energy spike from the fortress. We've hit a new layer of defense. It's charging up something big, and if we don't stop it soon, they'll be able to retaliate with enough power to level the entire city." Ilara's stomach dropped, her heart skipped a beat. They had been so focused on taking down the creature they hadn't considered that the Valkyrians had something more waiting, something even more dangerous than what they had just faced. "We need to move fast," Ilara said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We have to stop whatever they're powering up before it's too late." She turned to the squad, who had gathered their bearings after the battle. They were tired, but they understood the urgency. Ilara knew they were running on fumes, but they had no choice. They had to stop the Valkyrians from unleashing their final weapon, no matter the cost. "Form up," Ilara commanded. "We push forward now, no more distractions. We're taking down that fortress." They moved quickly through the city streets, the wreckage of the battle still fresh in their minds. As they navigated the twisted landscape, the sounds of distant fighting filled the air, but there was no time to pay attention to the smaller skirmishes ahead. They had a singular objective now. The Valkyrian fortress was their target, and they would stop at nothing to reach it. As they approached the base's perimeter, Ilara's heart raced again, her mind filled with the gnawing suspicion that they were walking into a trap. The Valkyrians had to know they were coming, but they had no choice but to push on. "Ilara, I've got a bad feeling about this," one of the soldiers muttered as they neared the entrance to the fortress, his hand tightening around his weapon. "I know," Ilara replied quietly, "but we don't have the luxury of turning back now." They moved into the shadows of the fortress, and immediately the temperature seemed to drop. The air grew thick with an unnatural heaviness. It was as if the very atmosphere had changed. The walls of the fortress loomed around them like an impenetrable barrier. They were close now, closer than they had ever been to the heart of the Valkyrian invasion. Ilara's mind raced, her fingers twitching around the device she still carried at her side. The weapon they had used earlier had proven effective, but there was something in the back of her mind that whispered the worst was yet to come. She didn't know how much longer they could hold out, how much longer humanity could keep fighting without knowing the true cost of the weapon they had unleashed. And as they moved deeper into the fortress, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something far more terrifying than they had ever imagined. The air inside the fortress was stifling heavy with the oppressive energy of the Valkyrian stronghold. As Ilara and her squad moved deeper into the heart of the enemy's base, every step felt like they were getting closer to something more sinister, something they hadn't anticipated. The walls seemed to pulse with a low hum, the very structure of the fortress alive with power. But it wasn't just the architecture that unsettled Ilara. It was the feeling that something was waiting for them in the shadows, something that had been prepared just for this moment. Ilara, look at this, Ryan's voice cut through the tense silence as he motioned to a large console embedded in the walls ahead. It was unlike any technology Ilara had seen before, a complex array of symbols and flashing lights. But there was one thing she noticed immediately: the core of the structure was not what they had thought. It was not a weapon or a shield generator. It was something much darker, something buried deep within the fortress. "This is it," Ilara said quietly, her voice full of a mix of dread and determination. "This is the heart of their operation." The console before them glowed brighter as Ilara approached its surface, flickering with alien symbols that seemed to shift and change. Before her eyes, she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her as she studied the device. This was the key to everything, the source of the Valkyrian power, their strength, their overwhelming force was tied to this very place. "Ilara, we don't have much time," Ryan said, his voice strained. "That energy spike we detected earlier is still growing. It's going to reach a critical level soon." "I know," Ilara muttered under her breath. Her fingers hovered over the console, unsure of what to do next. The alien technology was foreign to her, but there was something instinctual about it. She could feel it calling to her, as if it recognized her presence. The device seemed to respond to her touch, the symbols swirling faster and faster as though it was alive. A sudden explosion rocked the fortress, shaking the ground beneath them and throwing Ilara off balance. She grabbed onto the console to steady herself, but the blast wasn't what caught her attention. It was the eerie silence that followed. No alarms, no gunfire, just a cold stillness, as if the entire facility had gone dormant. "Did anyone else feel that?" one of her soldiers asked nervously. Before Ilara could respond, the console flared to life again, the symbols shifting rapidly, and then the walls around them began to move. The entire fortress seemed to be shifting, reorganizing itself. Ilara's heart skipped a beat as she realized what was happening. The Valkyrians had been waiting for them. They had known they would come. They had anticipated this attack from the very beginning, and now they were walking into a trap. "Ryan, we need to get out of here," Ilara shouted, but her words were drowned out by the sound of massive gears turning and the deep rumble of something immense awakening deep within the heart of the fortress. The ground beneath them shook again, but this time it wasn't just the structure shifting, it was something more, something vast and ancient. Ilara looked up and saw the source of the disturbance. A massive chamber had opened above them, a chamber filled with energy, the likes of which she had never seen before. It wasn't a weapon, it was something far more dangerous. The Valkyrians weren't just using this fortress as a command center, they had been using it to harness the power of an ancient alien artifact, a source of unimaginable energy that could warp reality itself, and now it was awakening. "Ilara, we need to leave now," Ryan urged, his voice full of panic. "This place is going to collapse, and we're not going to survive it." But Ilara couldn't tear her eyes away from the artifact above her. It was pulsing with power, its energy radiating outward like a storm that was about to break free. The Valkyrians had been using it to fuel their war, but now it was out of control, and Ilara knew if it was allowed to fully awaken, it would consume everything in its path. "Ilara," Ryan's voice broke through her thoughts. "Please, we don't have much time." She turned to him and saw the fear in his eyes. But there was no fear in her heart. There was only determination. She had led humanity to this point, and she would not back down now. They had one chance to stop this madness, one chance to save everything they had fought for. "We're not leaving without stopping this," Ilara said firmly, her eyes locked on the artifact. "We destroy that thing, or we die trying." With that, she raised her weapon and began moving toward the core of the artifact. But as she stepped forward, the entire fortress seemed to react, the walls shaking violently, as if trying to stop them, and Ilara knew that in this moment, the true test had begun. They weren't just fighting for Earth anymore, they were fighting for reality itself. The moment Ilara moved toward the artifact, the entire fortress seemed to awaken, its walls reverberating with an otherworldly hum that vibrated deep in her bones. The floor beneath her feet trembled with such intensity it felt as though the ground itself might split open. The air grew thick with energy, and Ilara could feel the heat radiating off the artifact above her. It was no longer just an object of power. It was alive, pulsing with raw energy that hummed with a deep sense of dread. She had seen many things in this wall, but nothing like this. "Ilara, get back!" Ryan shouted as he grabbed her arm, trying to pull her away, but she wrenched herself free, her gaze never leaving the glowing artifact. It was too late to turn back now. They had come too far, and this was the moment everything would change. "We have no choice," Ilara said, her voice steady. Even as the chaos around her grew louder, the walls of the fortress shifted and groaned as though the entire structure was protesting their presence. But Ilara pressed on, moving closer to the artifact with every step. The power was overwhelming. But she had to reach it, had to destroy it, before it could fully awaken. Her squad followed close behind, their faces grim with the knowledge that they were walking into the heart of the enemy's power. But none of them hesitated. They had fought for this moment, and they would see it through. "Watch out!" one of the soldiers called as a blast of energy surged from the artifact, a shockwave that sent them all stumbling backward. Ilara barely managed to keep her footing as the blast of energy crackled through the air around them. The artifact was fighting back now. It knew they were there, and it would do everything in its power to stop them. "Keep moving," Ilara ordered, her voice rising above the sound of the blasts. As she continued forward, her eyes fixed on the center of the chamber, where the artifact pulsed with growing intensity. She could feel the power coursing through the air like an electric storm, and she knew that if they didn't act now, the entire facility would collapse in on itself. "Ilara, we need to hurry." Ryan's voice was full of urgency. "That thing's getting stronger by the second." "I know," Ilara replied through gritted teeth. As she tightened her grip on her weapon, the pulse of energy from the artifact was becoming unbearable. The walls were closing in, the fortress seemed to be alive with fear and desperation. But Ilara had made a vow, and she would not let it end here. With a final burst of strength, Ilara lunged toward the artifact, her weapon raised and aimed directly at its core. The energy radiating from it seemed to swirl around her, as if trying to push her away, but she fought against it, her resolve unwavering. The moment her weapon made contact with the artifact, the entire fortress seemed to shake with an ear-splitting roar. The energy released from the impact was so intense that Ilara felt her body lurch, as if the world itself was being torn apart. The power surged through her like a tidal wave crashing against a cliff, and for a moment she thought she might be consumed by it. But then the world fell silent, the hum of the artifact dying down as the energy dissipated into the air, and the trembling of the fortress ceased. Ilara opened her eyes slowly, her heart pounding in her chest, and for a fleeting moment she thought it was over. But then the ground beneath them began to split wide open, and a deep rumbling sound filled the chamber. As the walls of the fortress began to crumble and collapse around them, Ilara turned to see her squad still standing, their weapons raised. But the destruction was overwhelming. The fortress was falling apart at an alarming rate, and they were running out of time. "Ilara, we have to get out of here," Ryan shouted over the deafening noise as debris fell around them. Without hesitation, Ilara turned and began running toward the exit, but the path was no longer clear. The fortress was coming apart in every direction, and escape seemed impossible. The walls buckled, as if the entire structure was being pulled into a black hole, and Ilara knew they were racing against the clock. The longer they stayed, the more dangerous it became. "Ilara, the exit is blocked," one of her soldiers called desperately as they reached a dead end in the crumbling hallway. There was no time to think, no time to hesitate. Ilara's mind was focused on one thing only: survival. They had to get out of there, or the sacrifice they had made would be in vain. "Through the ventilation shaft now," Ilara ordered, as she spotted a narrow passage on the side of the corridor. The squad wasted no time in scrambling through the shaft, the walls shaking around them. As they crawled through the narrow tunnel, the sound of collapsing debris growing louder with each passing second. They pushed forward faster than ever before, desperation pushing them beyond their limits. Ilara, we're almost there. Ryan's voice was full of relief. But Ilara didn't let herself believe they were safe. Not yet. They had come too far to die in the ruins of the Valkyrian fortress. She kept moving her mind, focused on one goal: escape. The tunnel narrowed even further as they neared the exit, and for a moment Ilara thought they might be trapped. But then they burst out into the open air, the light of the outside world blinding them as they tumbled into the dirt. Behind them, the fortress continued to collapse into ruin, its final cries echoing across the landscape. And Ilara knew they had done it. They had destroyed the heart of the Valkyrian war machine. But at what cost? The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The dust of the collapsing fortress hung thick in the air as Ilara and her squad staggered into the open. The sun above was blinding after the suffocating darkness of the underground fortress. But the warmth felt strange, almost foreign. They had survived the impossible. But as Ilara looked around, she couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. They had destroyed the Valkyrian heart. But there were countless other threats waiting beyond the horizon, and she knew the fight was just beginning. Ilara, is everyone all right? Ryan's voice came through her calmly, breaking through the silence that had settled over them. Ilara turned to see the rest of her squad gathered behind her, some limping, others shaken, but all of them alive. The medic was still tending to the soldier who had been injured earlier, but they had made it out together, and that was what mattered. "We're all accounted for," Ilara said, her voice hoarse but steady, as she looked back toward the ruins of the Valkyrian fortress behind them. The entire structure had crumbled into nothingness, a heap of broken metal and shattered stone. But the cost had been immense. They had lost soldiers in the battle, and now they had to carry the weight of those sacrifices. "We did it," one of the soldiers said quietly, her voice filled with disbelief. As she looked back at the wreckage, "We actually did it." Ilara didn't answer immediately. She could not, when the magnitude of what they had just accomplished still hadn't fully sunk in. They had destroyed an ancient power, something capable of warping reality itself. But it had come at a price. They were far from the only ones with such power, and there were still enemies out there waiting to rise and reclaim what they had lost. The Valkyrians might have been defeated, but the war was not over. "Ilara, what now?" Ryan asked, his tone softer than usual, but still full of determination. "We've won the battle, but the war is far from finished." Ilara took a deep breath and turned to face him, her eyes hard with the weight of the decision ahead. "Now we rebuild," she said, her voice firm. "We take what we've learned, and we prepare for whatever comes next, because this isn't over, not by a long shot." There was a long pause before Ryan spoke again, his voice quiet but resolute. "We'll be ready." Ilara nodded. She didn't have all the answers, yet she didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew one thing with certainty: humanity had proven it could survive, and it could fight back. They had taken down the most dangerous weapon the Valkyrians had ever created, and lived to tell the tale. They had made a stand, and showed the universe that Earth was not a world to be conquered. "We've earned a moment to rest," Ilara said after a long pause. "But after that we move forward. We start preparing for the next fight. We've seen what they can do, and we know the strength of our enemies. But we've also seen our own strength, and we're not going down without a fight." Ryan gave her a determined nod, and the rest of the squad rallied behind her, their faces set with resolve. They had won a hard-fought battle, but Ilara knew this was only the beginning. The universe was vast and unknown, and humanity was just beginning to find its place in the stars. As they made their way away from the wreckage of the Valkyrian fortress, Ilara glanced back one last time, the ruins of the enemy's stronghold, a symbol of their victory, but also a reminder that peace was fleeting, and fleeting peace would be the ultimate test for them all. They had proven they could survive, but now they had to prove they could endure. The long road ahead stretched out before them, and Ilara knew it would not be an easy path, but with every step they took, humanity would grow stronger and more determined to ensure that Earth would never fall to invaders again.